Welcome to the Corporate Learning Network videocast. I'm Jeff Cattell. Today I have with me Mark Ramos, Global Lead of Google's Enterprise EDU Learning Programs. Mark will be speaking at this year's Corporate Learning Week, November 12th through 15th at Disney's Yacht Club Resort in Orlando, Florida. Mark, welcome to the program.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey. Nice being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So just starting off, can you give us an idea? I know that there's lots of learning and development things that Google has been involved in, especially recently. So are there any things that are, innovative, different, that we can, that may stand out that other people may not know about right now?
There are definitely a lot of activities going on within Google in the innovative space, I think particularly related to the corporate learning space. It's interesting. I guess there's two views that I would have. One is internally, to be very candid, while Google does have a strong brand, we're still a relatively young company. So from an internal training perspective, frankly, Jeffrey, there's a lot of efficiencies and standards and frankly a lot of maturization and growing up we need to do. So one side of my response is internally we're still getting our act together and we're frankly building out a whole new league of ideally innovative and robust programs. The other way, I guess, to answer the question is I think Google more broadly, more strategically, we're really fixated on speed. And it's really critical that we develop programs that meet the needs of the business and meet the needs of our users globally, and to do that in a highly competitive environment. So a big strategy for us internally is making sure that we are building programs at the relevant speed to, again, meet the needs of the business and meet the needs of our learners. And that's a hard thing from an analysis perspective, from a production perspective, as well as from a deployment and measurement perspective. But that's definitely a big focus for us.
Do you have any specific examples of programs you guys have been working on or something that you've rolled out recently that fits in with that mindset of being innovative but also this maturation and growth process that you're talking about?
Sure. There's a lot of programs that I think are built on this framework or this foundation of speed, so to speak. One of them has to do with good old product training for our sales folks globally. Google, similar to a lot of other software companies, we do have a variety of releases of our products, but since speed is our ally or our enemy, depending how you look at it, we tend to release products on almost product versions on almost a weekly basis. So how do we keep up with that? We put together a new platform for our global sales team called Product Navigator, and Product Navigator is basically a 100% web-based platform where students can, that's linked to a content management system on the back end. And what we basically have done with Product Navigator is we've created a variety of snippets of small chunks of product information that's deployed via videos and another medium via this platform. And what's really neat about this platform is, and again talking about speed, Jeffrey, is we're able to work with our subject matter experts globally to modify and maintain the contents of this platform very quickly. So rather than taking weeks or perhaps a month or longer than that to update product training information, we can do that in almost a dynamic, if not on an hourly basis. That's one unique thing about the platform. The platform itself, as I did mention, it is web-based. We do a variety of cool things with it, CSS3, HTML5, and other things. But at the end of the day, it's about quick, targeted snippets where the users can filter like crazy within the system to determine exactly what they want, and then it's provisioned very quickly.
Great. So one of the other things I wanted to ask about was more broadly just what do you see in your position at Google as what's on the frontier for learning and development in general? What do you see as these emerging trends that either you are picking up on at Google or that you see other companies really picking up on that are going to be gaining speed, maybe not just now, but like 6 months or a year down the line?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's got a little bit of a pendulum in terms of things that a lot of learning theorists and technologists have thought about years ago, and now it's kind of coming to fruition. And to that degree, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, if I can say that, Jeffrey. But I think the areas around performance management, I think, are really critical now. in the sense of providing the right type of information to the right need at the right time, at the right size, and so on and so forth. So I think the technologies are there to focus a lot more on providing performance management solutions globally. I think what's also critical is thinking more about how we're actually measuring the social learning, the informal learning of our students globally. So we're actually piloting a fairly significant tin can effort within Google, working directly with the Rastisi team. Because I really think the tin can is, whether we want to call it as a replacement of SCORM, I guess it depends on your perspective, but I definitely see a lot of benefits to us globally in terms of really finally measuring in detail how the students are actually learning rather than the details of the class itself. So those are a couple, I think, very interesting trends that we're very keenly working on internally with the Google, as well as from an industry perspective, Jeffrey, something that I think is starting to take off and perhaps moving from the fad stage to a trending and perhaps more permanent stage.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning about this measurement is we've seen across the board people really interested in drawing data connections to what they're working on in learning and development. So one thing you mentioned, though, is these fads, and when I think of fads, I think of, and this may be unfair, and you can clarify and tell me if you disagree, but one of the things we keep hearing about is gamification. Another thing we keep hearing about is mobile learning, things like that that have a lot of interest in the field, but not necessarily the usage. So are there things from your perspective that we aren't hearing about in learning and development that we should be paying attention to? Something looming on the horizon, whether it's a new technology or whether it's just, as you're saying, this more back to basics approach, taking these learning theories and then just trying to draw metrics to them?
I kind of I would focus my response more on that buzzword that I mentioned beforehand, which is speed. I think it's so critical these days to definitely focus on the traditional aspects of adult learning and various pedagogical approaches, depending on which group you're supporting, whether it's K-12 or higher ed or corporate. But I think understanding how humans still learn in the best ways and then trying to sort out the fastest way to deliver, I think is really critical. There are elements of gamification which I think are really great, primarily I think on the social learning side. Mobile learning, Google's obviously in the Android space, so we have a lot of interest in that regard, and you've probably heard a lot about Google Glass, which we would consider more of a wearable or perhaps another type of an Android solution. But I think those are some particular areas where I think are really interesting. I think talking about wearable technologies in Google Glass, for example, the whole aspect of augmented reality and understanding various overlays in terms of how to use that to again access the right type of information for the right need at the right time. So those are some of the things that we're focusing on right now, and some of the things at least I have in my head.
Okay. I know what you'll be speaking about at Corporate Learning Week specifically has to deal with MOOCs, which has been, we can call it a fad, we can call it a trend, we can call it something that is, it is really changing the marketplace. I think depending on who you're looking at, they really can give you a varying opinion on that. But one of the things I think that hasn't maybe been talked about as much, which I believe you'll be touching on, is the use of MOOCs in a corporate environment. So have you guys been rolling them out at Google? I know you have, I believe it's called Course Builder that you put out at the end of last year. So is that something that's being worked into your workplace environment?
Yeah, absolutely. You did mention Course Builder. Course Builder is basically a course development tool and platform that's open source from Google. And its primary target audience is mostly higher ed and possibly K-12. But it does have corporate applications. I totally hear what you're saying in terms of some of the excitement or the hype related to MOOCs, and I think there needs to be, a new, I guess, commerce or economy of scale perspectives related to its benefits, because I think that's really what's driving a lot of universities and non-corporate entities is really getting that scale, even though the retention rates or the completion rates can still be fairly low. But it is something that we're definitely focusing on within Google. My personal take, to be candid, is I think people are getting excited about the volume and the scale and the benefits. I think it's really interesting because the most successful MOOCs are the ones where the blended strategies are the ones that are actually working out best. You know, obviously blending in the videos, blending in the live or the asynchronous activities, either from a social perspective or not, I think are really, really critical. And I think it's really the designing of the MOOC rather than the duration of the MOOC, which is really, I think, the key benefit to the success of that platform.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of switching gears almost completely here. One thing I wanted to ask you is about how learning and development is potentially different at these Silicon Valley startups. Yesterday I was talking with some people at Twitter, and I'm sure you've heard that they're rolling out Twitter University. And one of the things that they had to say is that, yes, as these tech companies are maturing, you know, Google's been around for more than a decade now, they're in this process where they're trying to create, they have a workforce that needs these robust training programs, but they're looking potentially at different ways, maybe not the generic or traditional approach that maybe your IBM or even your Microsoft or older tech companies have utilized. And they're looking at these innovative different ways of putting their stamp on learning and development. So is that something you guys have been doing at Google, and is that something you've seen at other Silicon Valley companies when they institute learning and training programs?
It's certainly something that I'm seeing. I don't have kind of a geographic perspective on the cool things these days. I think there's a lot of happenings and a lot of cool stuff coming out of this location here in Silicon Valley. But I think, you know, we should really, really be focusing on, you know, raw startup environments, such as what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Africa, what's happening in some parts of Asia and India, where folks are really, really thinking, forgive me, out of the box in terms of new ways to learn and new ways to deploy and build and measure and so forth. There's a lot of activities, interestingly, coming out of, as I mentioned beforehand, Egypt and Israel in terms of new applications. So I understand the value of Twitter and Twitter University, and I think that's awesome. I think we need to expand that and find more collaborative ways to support what they're doing as well as just join what they're doing, as well as other similar efforts from a social perspective. But I would not be, my lens, so to speak, would not be so geographically focused, to be candid.
Thanks, Mark. That was Mark Ramos, Global Lead of Google's Enterprise EDU Learning Programs. For more information on Mark or any of the other speakers at this year's Corporate Learning Week, you can view an agenda by clicking the Download Now button below. Thanks for watching.